Hello there everyone, welcome back to another Patreon deck guide, an in-depth guide. Today I am going to be talking about Zephyr. So before I get into this, of course, the usual shilling. If you are seeing this on YouTube, please do check out my Patreon linked in the description. My patrons have had this guide for quite some time. You can get access to competitive guides much earlier in the format than you'll be seeing these on YouTube down in that Patreon, and I do think it is quite reasonably priced for what you are getting. Of course, if you are watching on YouTube, please like the video if you enjoy it, and do subscribe to the channel for more One Piece card game content. And of course, to my patrons, thank you very much for your support. Right, with the shilling over with, let's talk about my favourite Set 2 deck. So Zephyr. Why would you want to play this deck? Brain empty, only removal. To be honest, I think this is the best reason. This is the most fun deck if you just want to turn your brain off and just be like, Tenkos Kuzan. Like, it's incredible. This deck is not a high IQ, outplaying, like, kind of crazy thing. If you have fundamentals of One Piece down, you can play this deck at basically 90% without a great deal of thought. And that's really fun. Also, that does make it kind of good for a tournament setting. I wouldn't say Zephyr is a good deck to take to a tournament necessarily, but one of the things it has going for it is that low bandwidth needed to kind of basically play the deck on optimal. You're kind of just relying on your cards to do really silly things. So, a comparison might be to a very high skill cap deck like Law. You have to think every single round. That's going to be taking up a lot of mental bandwidth. It's not going to happen with Zephyr. You are going to be having a lovely time doing the exact same thing as long as your cards basically show up and go your way. Fate. Basically, I said this because if you are just really wanting to test your luck and you think, you know what, fuck it, let's see if I can win with by just leaving everything to the whims of fate, then Zephyr's the deck for you. You have to hard draw everything. And if you hard draw it, man, you're going to have a good time. My friend Luke basically played this exact list. He yoinked it from me. Back in the first tournament of this format, and he came top 32. I played the exact same list, and I went X4 because, but I didn't see Tenkos Kuzan. So that's the sort of variance you're going to see here. It is very much going to come down to what you see. Of course, high power level. If you could just guarantee you were drawing, like, Ideal Curve, I don't really think there is a better deck than Zephyr in the game. Maybe Kaido on Ideal Curve, maybe, might be better, but, like, Kaido is also so vulnerable to getting rushed even on Ideal Curve that I think it doesn't really, Zephyr doesn't really have explicit weaknesses. If you draw Ideal Curve, it is very difficult for decks to just do anything against you. And I think the biggest reason is because you are playing a rogue deck, the odds of your opponent horrendously misplaying into you are actually quite high. A lot of players are just not going to understand what your deck does. They're not going to have tested the matchup extensively. Maybe they've played it a couple times, but it was so long ago that they can't remember. Maybe they panic in the moment. You can get your opponent very, very flustered with some of the things you're doing. These are advantages that playing Rogue has, and that's obviously the trade-off you're making for something that's less, usually less good than the meta options. Okay, so what are the strengths of Zephyr? Why would you want to play this deck? Specifically, this has got the best removal in the game. And I don't think this is a contentious statement to make. The Tenkos Kuzan is an insane card, where the turn you play it, usually in every other black deck, you're just popping a 5 cost. It's pretty good. But you know what's better than that? Popping a 5 cost and then using your leader effect to also pop an 8 cost. That's pretty damn hard to stop. And this basically means that... sorry. The turn that you come down with the Tenkos Kuzan, it's a huge swing turn, and it's very difficult for your opponent to come back. In addition, there's basically one card in the game that you can't instantly deal with. Two, I guess. Tenkos Kuzan can't instantly deal with Tenkos Kuzan, and you can't instantly deal with 9-cost Whitebeard. So those are the big issues in terms of instant removal, but anything else in the game is just being instantly dealt with, and that is so powerful. The swing turns you get here, you will have wasted your whole opponent's last turn, and you will have established a Kuzan on board, which your opponent is just not going to be able to instantly remove. It's incredibly unlikely, and at that point the game is run away. From there, your opponent's never going to be able to build a board, and as long as you have blocker, like 1 or 2 blockers, and you've got some level of of defense and some level of life left, it's very difficult to lose. The power level ceiling on this deck is insanely high. As I say, if you do draw like Ideal Curve, it's basically impossible to beat, right? Like, and we'll talk about the curve more in a little bit because there's some additional stuff I want to discuss. But yeah, it's really difficult to beat an Ideal Curve deck. I'm so sorry about that. So, some of the best power cards in the game, I'm sort of repeating myself here, but, Black just has disgustingly high power level cards, and they're basically all going to be on the next slide, or the slide after. Also, you actually get access to ramp because of purple, and that ramp is quite essential, I think, in making this deck being anywhere near as good as it actually is. It lets you, one, recover from being selected to go first, and in a format with so many going second decks, this is a major advantage. And it's also green's worst enemy. You eat Kinemon for breakfast. So obviously Kinemon has fallen off quite hard, but I think it is in a right position to come back with the sheer prevalence of red that we're seeing, and especially if people start realizing that Zora actually has quite a good Whitebeard matchup. I don't know how people haven't realized that yet, but when the people clock onto that, then we'll probably see green swing back into fashion. And you just eat green for breakfast. You also have a pretty good matchup into Whitebeard, so that's something to say as well. But yeah, green, it's like literally like 80-20 in Zephyr's favor against green. So what are your weaknesses? Red Zoro is a really, really, really bad matchup. If the Red Zoro player knows what they're doing, it is like 60-40. Most of the time, they're not going to know what they're doing. They're going to be a bad player, or they're not going to know the Zephyr matchup, in which case it's much more 50-50 to in your favor. But obviously, having a major meta deck be a bad matchup for you is a huge weakness. You have no consistency. You are hard drawing everything. This is just the issue with Black in set 2. If we had top 5 searchers, I think Black would be probably S tier. I really think it would be way, way, way more competitive. And when people have experience with the matchup, you are significantly worse. So a big part of why Rogue is so good is because people misplay into it. And I've played Zephyr into people who know how Zephyr plays, and the deck is basically still very good, but obviously it's less good when compared to people making mistakes. So obviously you are going to probably see the deck overperform into players who don't really know what it does. And of course, you're going second deck in a format full of going second decks, which means you kind of have to win the die roll. If you are a going first deck in the format, then you don't really care if you win the die roll because you're probably going to get what you want anyway. But you're sort of fighting for going second into a lot of matchups, and that can be quite annoying. Okay, so let's talk about the key cards. And as I said here, basically these are all the power cards, plus Jack. So let's talk about the ideal curve. You want to go second. So that means you pass turn 1, you almost never play a card turn 1. This also leaves Shockwave or Impact Wave open for you, which means if your opponent misplays and they play a card before they attack with Leader, you can get insane value out of that. Turn 2, you want to be playing Borsalino. That's your ideal play. Turn 3, you want to be playing Sakazuki. Turn 4, you want to be playing Kuzan plus Borsalino, or like Sakazuki plus have an Impact Wave up, or like Swing 7 plus Kuzan plus have an Impact Wave up. Some sort of combination like that. And turn 5, you want to play Tenkos Kuzan. That's your ideal curve. It's pretty much impossible for most decks to keep up with that. It is very, 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 very powerful. Your ideal curve going first changes. Turn 1, you do nothing. Turn 2, you play Jack, and you have to ramp with Jack. And actually, if you go first and you see Jack, the deck is actually better. That's better than going second, but you're kind of at the whims of fate there because you're mulling hard for a 4 of that you have to see, and you don't get a draw turn 1. Of course, you do get the draw turn 2, but you're not going to be able to take any damage before that, so you're not being as able to filter. So that's the only thing. But of course, if you do see that, then turn 2, you're playing Jack, you're ramping, so you're up to 4 Don. Turn 3, you are at 6 Don, you can play Sakazuki, or, Borsalino plus Impact Wave. Turn 4, Borsalino plus Kuzan, or Borsalino plus 7k swing plus Impact Wave, or Kuzan plus 7k swing plus Impact Wave. Those are all very, very good. And then, of course, turn 5, Kuzan. And that's even better because you're playing it when your opponent's at 8 Don, which means they're just not going to have anything you can't deal with. Like, mathematically, they literally cannot. And it means their whole board is going bye-bye. And that's usually why going first, if you guarantee Jack, is better. So that's the mulligans. And as I sort of said, every single one of these cards is outrageously powerful, right? Kuzan replaces itself and just makes all your removal go insane. Sakazuki will just kill basically anything at that point in the game, and 7k body. Borsalino is one of the best cards in the game. Kuzan 10 cost is, you know, the heart and soul of the deck. It is unreasonably powerful. It is so good. And of course, Impact Wave is one of the best 2k counters in the game. And especially if players aren't playing around it, they're going to have a rough time. I think with Smoker being as popular as it was during the format and still is, just on a casual level, a lot more people know what Impact Wave does. So, you know, they're less likely to misplay into it, but it is always possible. And you could consider playing Hell's Judgment or something as well. I don't, because you really do need every single Don. You cannot afford to be doing Don minuses, which kind of sucks. Because otherwise that card would be like insanely good in this deck. Right, let's talk about the deck list. So this is my deck list. I think it's basically I don't really think there are many, if any, changes you can make to this. But let's talk about it. So we play for Sasaki and for Jack. These are both ramp cards. You want to see one of them. Obviously, you would much rather see Jack than Sasaki because you have to wait a turn for Sasaki, and you have to commit a Don into him, and it's just horrendously awkward. You would much rather get a Jack. Especially because Jack is just non-play, and there's no risk of your opponent like just removing the Sasaki, which puts you on Suicide Watch. So those are your rampers. Then for blockers, we've got 2 copies of Uta, 4 copies of Borsalino, and 4 copies of Hina. We want a bunch of big blockers. The reason I'm not playing any chump blockers is because with the amount of Vistas running around in the format, with the amount of Robins, they're just never going to live. You're never going to get actual decent value out of them. Unless you're a deck like Law, for example, right? Where like those actively are a key part of your game plan, and you are able to kind of space them out and like make sure you're getting value out of them, and you know they can kind of work there. But like here, I don't think they're worth it. And 10 blockers is like enough. You need to have one on the board like by turn 6 basically, so you're not just folding to random rush. Then of course the power cards for Kuzan, for Sakazuki, for Borsalino, for 10 cost Kuzan, and 2 5-cost Smoker. He's also another power card. Getting double attack potentially is very, very powerful. 2k counters, 2 X Drake, 2 Sengoku, 4 Suru, 4 Garp. We need all these 2k counters. This is less than I used to play. I cut a few of them to include some more blockers. But if you feel that there are too many blockers, you could cut the Utas and include more copies of X Drake, for example. And you could cut the Baguas and include more copies of Sengoku. And of course the events, 2 Bagua and 4 Impact Wave. I like playing the Bagua because it's another ramp card that you can use and that your opponent might not actually see coming. So you can surprise them by going into a Kuzan when they're not the 10 cost Kuzan, like a turn ahead of they're expecting. That I've done that before, and it really, really can swing a game. And of course 4 Impact Wave because the card is ridiculous. I don't really think there is a huge amount you could change about this list. Also, a final note on mulligans. Let me go back to the key cards here. The mulligans for this deck, you're going to see what you're looking for. It's kind of always the same. It's just these. It's the power cards plus Jack. So the way I would do it is if you were to assign like points values to each of these cards, right? So like going first, Jack is 3 points. Going second, it's none. And then Kuzan is 3 points. Borsalino, Sakazuki, Kuzan are 2 points, and Impact Wave is 1 point. And you want to be aiming for maybe like 6 points or so. If you have at least a 6-point hand, it's worth keeping. If it's less than that, depending on context, it might be worth keeping. But and this is not a hard and fast rule or anything, but this is just a way to gauge roughly how good your hand is, because you have to draw everything. So opening your power cards is kind of the best way to see them. And this should help you at least not be mulliganing hands that are like actually worth keeping on average. Like if you opened, for example, Borsalino, Sakazuki, Impact Wave, yes, that's not a perfect hand, but it's 5 points, and it's kind of good, and I'd probably be tempted to keep it. Especially if you're going second, you got an extra draw, you got enough time, your curve is sorted until turn 4, right? You've got so many draws until then that's fine, right? However, if your opening hand was like 10 cost Kuzan and nothing else, or 10 cost Kuzan and an Impact Wave, whilst that's okay, it's still it is only 4 points, and you have nothing, right? The first few turns, potentially, so that's why I would probably mulligan a hand like that. Anyway, that's just a note on there, and also, every time you go first, you're hard mulliganing for Jack. You don't really care about anything else. You have to see Jack. That's the only other thing. So don't worry about that. The fact that I'm not going to mention that again. I'm just saying you have to hard mulligan for Jack going first, and after that it's just power cards. Right. Let's talk about matchups. Kinemon, this is your best matchup by far. If Kinemon once again returns to being like, almost half the metagame, Zephyr becomes insane. So again, you want to be going second, and there's just every single matchup you want to be going second, so I'm not going to talk about that again either. And of course, if you do go first, you want to mulligan for Jack. Last time I'll say that. So, green's really weak to your whole game plan. Fundamentally, they suck to your game plan, especially if you go second. Their turn 1 play is nothing. Their turn 2 play is playing out a Yamato ahead of curve. And that's fine because you're going into your turn. You can play out something like a Borsellino, and they're not going to be able to rest it or anything like that. And on their next turn, maybe they play out an Okiku or they do whatever, and then you're going into a Sakazuki turn and you can really pressure them. But basically, like, nothing they play is... they don't play 6 costs, ever, basically. They do play a couple 7 costs in Kid, but they play a lot of 8 costs. And what that means is the turn you play 10 cost Kuzan, you're going to pop one of their cheaper things, maybe a Blocker Law, or a Yamato, or a Okiku, or something like that, and then you're going to swing with your leader, and you're going to pop their Odin, or you're going to pop their 8 cost Kid, and that's enough of a swing that at that point the game's kind of sealed. You play on curve, and as long as you drop 10 cost Kuzan on turn 5, Kinemon basically can't win. The only chance they have, this is very, very difficult for this to actually happen, is if they turn 4 and turn 5 Odin, which you can stop by not removing their entire board, right? The only way they can do that is if you let them have 1 or fewer characters in play on their turn 4. And it is possible to prevent that, right? So if you see Okiku Yamato on their turn 3, whilst it can be very, very tempting to remove them, if you have an inkling that they have double Odin, right? If you've seen them search or something, or like, you know, you just have like an idea that might be on the table, it can be worth just letting them keep that, because you know what? That is very, very, very beatable. 2 Odins is kind of not, because you just will not be able to deal with both unless you are able to play a 4-cost Kuzan on turn 4, in which case you can deal with both, and it still sucks, but it sucks way less. That's actually okay. That if anything, that's kind of good, because actually then they've basically wasted 2 turns in a row without really doing a great deal. Okay. So yeah, wait until turn 4 to play 4-cost Kuzan, just in general, because you don't want your opponent really being able to interact with that card. You want to put them in an awkward position where like they are potentially sacrificing a big play to do anything about it, and you want to bait them into making the big play, because you know for a fact you're going to remove whatever the hell they do. But yeah, overall, very advantageous matchup. Definitely your best matchup. You should be cooking green players for breakfast. Zoro, this is pretty 50-50. If the Zoro player really knows what they're doing, it's disadvantageous, but most of the time they won't. Again, you want to be going second, and here you just got to see Borsa, Impact Wave, and Kuzan. The rest don't really matter. Borsellino is hugely important. Being able to just have a 6k blocker, which you can just throw into your first block, and if your opponent commits like 4 Don into swinging into Borsellino, frankly, it's done its job, right? You've gotten a huge amount of value out of it. They've not established a board just to remove this 1 blocker. That's fine. I'm okay with it. You've delayed them, you've stopped them from rushing you down, you've got things to attack that are rested on their board. That's absolutely fine. Try not to go below 2 life before turn 5. I know it's very easy to say these things, but you know, you do not want to be in a situation where they are able to just bypass your blockers if you're at like 1 or 0 life with like a Rush Luffy, and then you just lose. Only go for board. Do not go for life until that board is gone. When you have stabilized on turn 5 and that board is destroyed, yes, okay, now you can really, really pressure them. But until then, I wouldn't do it. It's very hard for Zoro to recover once you're stabilized, and a turn 4 4-cost Kuzan is incredibly powerful going second, because Zoro seems to have 9-cost Whitebeard glued to their hand, and they're always going to play it on curve. But if they play it on curve, you go, yep, cool, swing with Kuzan, -4 cost, play 10-cost Kuzan, it's dead. And then you get to clear something else for free as well, if you want, with your leader effect, but you might not even need to. So yeah, overall, definitely winnable. Your worst matchup for sure, but definitely winnable. Law, this is slightly disadvantageous. But it really does depend. So your Mull is, again, usually your power cards. If Law is able to pop off and aggro you down, this is really, really difficult, right? Because Law is able to play their rush cards, bounce them, or restand them, or like, you know, do these huge swings into face with restand Law. That can be really, really rough. The game is about stabilizing until you can establish 10-cost Kuzan. If you don't get 10-cost Kuzan, this matchup is basically unwinnable, and that's true in general. But, you know, this matchup especially, because of how Law's got a toolbox to actually see their pieces, and the fact they're going to plus Mega off of it, if you do not have your Kuzans to just go, yep, pop your Blocker Law, yep, pop your Blocker Law, and you're not just popping them every single turn, you can't win. Shockwave can steal wins from a poor Law player, but even a good Law player, there's only so much they can do to stop you just going, yep, cool, Shockwave, pop your Chopper. But the big thing is if they're not playing with the potential removal in mind, you can screw them out of a shambles, which can literally swing the game in 1 turn. If you are more skilled and draw decently, you should win. But again, it can be, you're sort of literally hoping you draw the right cards, right? So that's always the danger. So I put slightly disadvantageous for that reason, because law is hella consistent. Whitebeard, I think this is advantageous for Zephyr. Firstly, you're going second, just makes them want to cry because they want to go second. Everything that isn't Ace or 9 cost Whitebeard is insanely susceptible to removal. You don't even have to try. It's getting removed. And of course, Ace and 9 cost Whitebeard are still susceptible to your removal. Ace gets removed by a leader effect, and 9 cost Whitebeard is just a Kusan away. The ideal thing is if they are trying to play conservative and they play an Ace turn 4, and then turn 5 they play a Whitebeard, a 9-beard, and then just pass, and you go, yep, cool, swing with Kusan, reduce Whitebeard cost, play 10 cost Kusan, pop Whitebeard, swing leader, pop Ace, and that's it. That's basically impossible to recover from. You've won the game off of that. Whitebeard doesn't usually early game aggro, it does a couple of 6k swings, but it's fine. So you have time to get set up, you have time to survive, and you eat 6k attacks for breakfast. You play I think it's the old list played 20 or 24 2k counters. This plays 18 or something. So you have the 2k counters out the arse. You got the 4k counters. You're fine on those. And once you establish your 10 cost Kusan, Whitebeard is never going to be able to build a board again. And if Whitebeard can't build up a board, later on in the game, it's just going to be defending. And as long as you're able to just play down a single blocker, and you have 1 life, you can't really lose. It's really, really difficult to lose, especially if that blocker is Borsellino, which means it can't be hard removed. So yeah, overall, I would say this is a pretty calm matchup for Zephyr, as long as you don't Giga Brick. Ivankov, again, I think this is pretty advantageous to Zephyr, because Eva does basically nothing besides leader swings for the first 4 turns of the game, right? Especially going first, they're going to, turn 1, they're going to play Perona, turn 2, they're going to play Doffy, turn 3, they're going to play Croc, turn 4, they're going to play Eva Luffy, right? That's their ideal curve, which means each turn they're going 5, 5, 5, 5, right? Okay, you can very easily lose 1 card per turn, but you should probably take the first 1 or 2 of those just to build up a bit of a hand and basically use your life to dig for your power cards. Croc 5 can be removed on curve by Sakazuki, which is always really, really nice when that happens. And you can easily remove a 6k Luffy on your 10 cost Kusan turn, super, super easily through leader effect. So there's no stress whatsoever. And of course, if you have a 4 cost Kusan out, then it's even easier than that. As long as you don't brick hard, this is a pretty straightforward matchup. And yeah, it's, yes, Luffy can bounce your Borsellino's, and that's your only worry. As long as you can deal with Luffy instantly, the turn it comes down, you're fine. It's really not that stressful. Okay, next we got Kaido. I think this is slightly advantageous. This is a bit more stressful. It doesn't play much for the first few turns, so you can basically know you're not going to get rushed down. But Magellan and Hail's Judgment can really mess you up. Mainly Magellan. If they Magellan you and you don't have a counter ramp card, it can feel so rough. And every turn you get set back on the 10 cost Kusan is awful. But obviously they have to, they can search for it, so they need to know that they need that card in this matchup, which they probably do. Be mindful about taking damage. You need to be very calculating about when you take damage, because you basically want them to not burn 7 you. You would rather have cards in hand until you want them to burn 7 you, because that means they can't actually establish a board and the game is swung from that point. 10 cost Kaido can really ruin your day unless your board is exclusively Borsellino's and Smokers, which it can be. And even if you've just got one of each of those out, the 10 cost Kaido is going to be so not worth it that if they do it, you're kind of vibing anyway. And Smoker can really do bits in this matchup just with that double attack pressure. But yeah, overall, I would say this is pretty advantageous for Zephyr, maybe 55, 45, 60, 40. But you can absolutely get blown out if Kaido sees, the nuts. But it's a pretty inconsistent deck. More consistent than you, mind, but pretty inconsistent. Okay, and finally coming on to black. So you'll notice that I basically say that the exact same things for Zephyr and Smoker, because it literally is just the same, and it's just skill difference. You just with Smoker. Sorry, I probably should have removed this for Zephyr, but with basically the only thing to be mindful of is not letting them get the Smoker effect off easily, because 7k swings are annoying because you have a bunch of 2k counters, but there's nothing you're really playing, unless you're forced to play a Suru in some sort of really awkward scenario, that is actually going to let them get it off easily without them chaining other effects onto it, right? You're basically playing 4, 6, and 10. Those are the only, and 5. Those are the only units you're really playing. If you're able to establish 10 cost Kusan first, you should win. That's usually a big enough swing that you're kind of good to go, especially in combination with your 4 cost Kusan. The thing to bear in mind, if you're able to play your 10 cost Kusan first, and then have a Suru in hand for the turn they Tenkos Kuzan, because if they play immediately after, if you Suru their Kuzan and then just swing with leader effect, you clear their Kuzan, that's it. They are not winning, they wasted a whole turn, they lost their Kuzan, you've got yours up. As long as they don't have some silly rush and you're like on 0 life, you're fine. I mean, like, as long as you basically have a blocker and they don't just go swing 16 or something with the smoker effect, then you're fine. Basically, it does really come down to who draws more power cards. If they draw more power cards, it's uphill. If you draw more power cards, you should be stomping. It's just a skill issue, to be honest. But yeah, overall, that is Zephyr. Now, I think this deck is really, really fun. I really, really do enjoy it. As I say, here's the deck list once again. But, you know, something to bear in mind with it, as I said, is you are very much sort of throwing caution to the wind and hoping you're just going to, you know, draw all your cards. Overall, though, it can be a very rewarding deck. It has seen success in Japan. It has seen success in English. If you are lucky enough, you will have a fantastic run with this deck. And it's always fun seeing a Zephyr at top tables. If you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel for more One Piece card game content. If you're seeing this on Patreon, thank you so much once again for your support. I will put up another poll and we can decide what the next one of these guides will be. If you're seeing this on YouTube, please do check out my Patreon, linked in the description. There will probably be set 3 guides going up very soon, if they're not already up by the time you see this. So I hope you are excited for those, and of course do check out the Patreon if you want to check those out. But otherwise, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Cheers.